Hi friends, Miss Ray here. So I wanted to take you through the mini lesson on drafting a thesis statement and show you kind of the examples and just talk through it in case you're still a little bit confused on thesis statements. So we are now at the third step in our writing process. We are ready to write our thesis statements. We've read our prompt, we've broken it down, we've annotated it, we make sure we really understand what the driving questions are. What are we being asked to develop an argument based upon? We've done the research. We've looked for sources, for articles, for other pieces of information. We've evaluated those sources. We've looked at their credibility. We've done some lateral reading as well. And we've written rhetorical précis so that we can really engage with that research as well. We've pulled some evidence that we might want to use. So now we've built up a lot of context on the topic itself. So we are now ready to plan our thesis statement. So this is our argument itself. It's our contract with the reader. You want to think of a thesis as something that's going to guide the entirety of your essay. It is specific in response to your prompt. It's argumentative in nature. It takes a clear stance on the issue, and it's an assertion, not merely an announcement. So you are making the argument, and then we are going to follow that thesis throughout the rest of the essay when we write our body paragraphs. We'll have topic sentences that act as claims to work to support that thesis. We'll set up some context for evidence, and then we'll provide commentary that shows how that evidence works to prove that claim. So all of this relates back to that thesis statement. Then finally, we'll head to the introduction and our conclusion. So the thesis statement falls typically at the end of the introduction. So if we think of the essay as an hourglass, it starts broad. The introduction broadly introduces the topic that will be discussed, gives us some necessary background information or context that we may need to further understand the topic, and then it leads to that very specific and arguable thesis statement. And that we stay in that specific focus for the body of the essay as well. We're focusing on how evidence and development of claims is going to work to prove that thesis statement. We stay narrow there. Then our conclusion, we extend back from that narrow argument situated into the broader context. So conclusions might include a call to action. They might rephrase the thesis statement and bring it back now that we have a body of evidence. We have deeper understanding on that thesis statement, but we go back to that broad. So broad, narrow focus from our thesis to the body, and then we go back out to the broad for the conclusion. So the thesis itself, there's some elements that we want to look at. The length of a thesis statement is typically 1 to 2 sentences. They are brief, but they are very powerful, and they are the driving focus for your essay. Everything that follows, everything that appears in your body paragraphs works to prove that thesis statement. That being said, if you are then writing and you realize, oh wait, I'm taking this in a different direction, or I'm bringing in things that aren't covered in my thesis, you have 2 choices. Either adjust those things or revise your thesis. Be sure that it is powerfully driven to really focus your essay. Typically, it appears at the end of an introductory paragraph. Notice it says typically. This is not a hard and fast rule. You'll note that often when you're reading things like op-eds or argumentative articles, the thesis might appear at the end. So we build that argument to then lead to that argumentative thesis. We've built all the context and the evidence and the commentary. Most writers in beginning comp choose to put it at the end of their introductory paragraph. This is a great starting place. It's the most typical and common place to see a thesis statement at this grade level. The purpose of a thesis, the clear presentation of the main argument of your essay, and it is an assertion. It's an argument about that topic and not merely an announcement. That's incredibly important. Do not just make an announcement. We always want to be thinking about our audience whenever we're writing anything, and this includes our thesis statement. When you look at your topic, what is it that you want your audience to think? What do you want them to do? What do you want them to consider? Be sure that these things are all enveloped in your thesis itself. This drives the purpose. So if we go from subject or topic to thesis, we want to be sure that we think about the subject, we explain it, we know our background, we've done some research, and then we make an assertion. So for example, our subject might be basketball. Who's the better player, Michael Jordan or LeBron James? We want to give some explanation. There's lots of controversy over who the best NBA basketball player in history is. And then we want to make an assertion. So the argument here that Dr. Willis has made is that Michael Jordan is clearly the better of the two. So that's the assertion. That's what she knows she needs to prove in the thesis itself. So here are some example thesis statements that make that assertion. Considering the era in which he played, his profound ability to assert total control offensively and defensively, and his unparalleled shooting percentage, Michael Jordan is undoubtedly a better basketball player than LeBron James. So notice that this thesis statement, we have a clear argument. Michael Jordan is undoubtedly a better basketball player than LeBron James. Boom, that's our clear assertion. We also have a preview of some of the reasons. The era which he played, his ability to assert control on the court, and his shooting percentage. So I know, as the reader, that these are the things that will show up in the essay. This is a contract with me as the reader. I will read about the era, I will read about his ability to assert control, and I will read about the importance of shooting percentage when thinking about who's the greatest. So this is considered a listed thesis. It previews the things that will show up in the body paragraphs. This is a perfectly acceptable thesis statement. Notice that the second thesis statement is still arguable. It still has a clear assertion. However, we don't have those examples listed in the thesis itself. Michael Jordan is, without a doubt, a more skilled basketball player than LeBron James and should remain considered the best basketball player of all time. So here we have a clear assertion. It's not an announcement. While the reasons aren't previewed, I still know that every single body paragraph, every subclaim, and all of the evidence is going to work to prove that Michael Jordan is more skilled and should be considered the best basketball player of all time. Now, I still may see a paragraph on the era, a paragraph on ability to assert control, and a paragraph on shooting percentage. Those things just aren't listed out. So here's two examples of two different styles of thesis statement. When we're doing this in comp, so you've started with a prompt, a New York Times prompt. So I did an example of this with, can cell phones be educational tools? So here's the prompt I started from. I read the background information. It's like, all right, this looks interesting. This is something I would like to research. This was my prompt. My second step now was to do that research. I then pulled some different examples and I know what I'm going to base my argument on. So student engagement levels are higher when students use technology that they're familiar with. I found that in my research. I also learned that students have access to tools and apps that help them to remain organized if they use their cell phones in class. I learned that students can spend up to 20% of their class time checking social media and texting. Oof, that's something I really wanted to consider when I was building my argument. But I also learned that they could replace other needed supplies to save budget for other things. So I've linked my sources here if you're interested in checking them out. But I was able to find pros and cons. With all of your topics, you should have been able to find some things that were said about both sides of the issue, or more than two sides of the issue, right? A lot of these are nuanced topics that you're tackling. But taking all of the research that I did into consideration, I wanted to develop my own claim based upon what I learned, what the research said, and what I discovered. So I decided that yes, that 20% of class time spent not focused and checking social media and texting, that was a problem. But all the research that I read that talked about all the benefits, in my mind, those benefits outweighed that cost. So I drafted a thesis that was argumentative in nature. While often seen as a distraction in the classroom, cell phones should be embraced as the engaging educational tools that they are due to their accessibility and versatility in our digital age. So I have given a clear argument. Yes, we should embrace cell phones as an educational tool. I've even given a preview as to the reasons, accessibility and versatility. Now you'll see when I write my outline that my subclaims are going to be much more specific than just they are accessible, they are versatile. However, by keeping it relatively vague here with accessibility and versatility and not the specific examples that you'll later see in my outline, I'm able to really open myself up to a variety of options and ways to use this research that I've found. So the rubric itself, how you are being assessed on the thesis itself, it's part of the claim and focus band. So you'll notice that claim and focus, our target is to develop a clear argumentative thesis statement in response to a prompt and to maintain focus on that argument throughout the essay. So for the purposes of just looking at the thesis, I've highlighted the areas of the rubric that are thesis specific. Notice that focus on that thesis is also part of this. However, when we're assessing just our thesis statement, we're looking simply at the highlighted pieces. So if we're in the bruh level of things, the thesis does not exist. It is a myth. It is not there. There is no thesis. Yikes. If we're amateur, there's a thesis, kind of. It's not really argumentative. And truly, to be a thesis, you have to have an argument. There's an attempt at a thesis, but it might not respond to the prompt. It's not clearly argumentative. It's pretty rough. She needs some work. If we're the thesis is there, it's mostly tied to the prompt, but the language might be a little bit weak. It might not be very argumentative in nature. It may say things like seems to, or sometimes, or maybe. It could be a little bit wishy-washy. If we're okay, then the thesis responds to the prompt, and it's argumentative in nature. It might be formulaic, but that's okay. That's still at that proficient 4 grade level. Sweet. We are okay. We get it. We've got the thesis. If we're aiming for those higher levels, a well-done thesis responds to the prompt and takes a very clear stance on the issue. So it's got a strong argument in there. And if it's epic, it responds to the prompt, it takes a clear stance, and it demonstrates nice, strong word choice and thoughtful sentence structure, or sentence structures, depending on how many sentences you have. Notice that typically when we look at a writing rubric, the difference between the well done and the epic level is often style. Style, style, style. So both of these levels, the 5 and the 6, they're just different variations of an A. They're both advanced in nature, but epic just takes it that extra notch. So when you self-evaluate your own thesis statements, be sure to think about this prompt while you're drafting your thesis, and then while you evaluate your thesis as well. Where are you and why is that where you are with this skill? Now, this little assessing our understanding thesis quiz is a great way to just be sure that you are on the right track when it comes to the thesis statements. So it's a quick activity. There's only 6 questions through it. You're going to read each thesis, the original thesis, and then read the revisions, which one is strongest. So for example, in this paper, I will explore the topic of gaming in education. Oof, that's not a thesis, right? That's an announcement of what we will be writing about. I don't know what the person thinks about the topic. I don't know where they stand. I don't know what argument they are making. So there's some options here. Gaming in education is an important issue. All right, still not really taking a side, not making an argument about it. Yes, it's important. Obviously, I'm writing about it. Clearly, I think it's important, but what do I think about it? Do I think it should be used? Do I think it should not? So let's not go with that one. That's not quite there yet. So if we were to select this one, our check would tell us that, this doesn't so much work. This is just an announcement. All right, if we look at the second one, most people agree that games in education is a controversial issue, and this essay will explore that issue, ultimately working to convince you of the value of gaming in education. We're getting closer, but we still have some problems with this thesis here. So we have some context. Yep, it's a controversial issue. And we have here a bit of an argument, working to convince you of the value of gaming in education. So this language is hinting at an argument. The suggestion is there. Someone has whispered it across the room. But look, there's still this announcement here. This essay will explore this issue. Oof. We want to avoid announcements and just focus on assertions. So this is still at that level. We get a preview, but there's not a strong argument present, and it still is containing an announcement, not just an assertion. All right, if we look at this option now, as a new generation of students enters college, it's time for higher education to use gaming to appeal to students and make learning more engaging. All right, this is a solid thesis, right? We have a clear argument. Higher education should use gaming. We even have a preview of the reasons, right? The generation of students who's entering college is able to engage in this type of education and gaming. It's something that age group is familiar with. And then also the engagement level. So there are things I'm going to read in the essay that work to prove that thesis. So I would say, I think this is the one. And this will tell me, yep, good job, makes a clear assertion, doesn't just provide an announcement. So this activity will take you through further examples. I want to show you one more that gets at weak language. Here it is. So this little guy. It's about time that we support small businesses better in this country. Okay. Original thesis statement contains an argument, but certainly could be improved. So let's look at our options. It's difficult to say what the right course of action is in a tough economy, but helping small businesses seems like a good idea. So notice the language seems like a good idea. This is what I mean when I say weak argument, right? Or vague argument, or not quite argumentative enough. You're introducing doubt for your reader. This seems like it could work, right? You've done the research. Speak with authority. Make that solid argument.